What's going on, everybody? Chrome on Rust here. We're going to be taking a look at a Natalya's build for the Demon Hunter. You know, in patch 2.2, it's pretty nice to see that M6 has kind of gone by the wayside, and that UE and Natalya's is kind of what's on the forefront right now. I do feel like a lot of people are running with the UE set, which I don't blame them. It's an extremely powerful set, but Natalya's has a ton of potential, especially for speed clears. Now this build is primarily, I would say, for hardcore, not that you can't run it in softcore and actually maybe make it a little bit more efficient because you're going to be able to drop a ton of survivability. But if you are actually looking to run this in hardcore, you're going to be having a ton of toughness. Now this build is like the freezing point Demon Hunter. You're the point man. You're running out in front of your barbarian, you're running out in front of the monk, and you're way out in front of that other Demon Hunter or wizard. You know, not all the time or anything like that. You still do want to be, playing careful, making sure that you don't die. If you lose like 15 seconds of efficiency in a rift because you don't rip, then it's totally worth it. But primarily, when you are in group comps, we'll say you have a monk, a barb, and a demon hunter in the back line doing that high damage, your main goal is you're going to be using a calamity. Calamity is going to pretty much mark everything while you are strafing. So you're running out in front of everybody. You are applying a damage buff or, debuff, whatever you want to say, to the mob. So you're going to be dealing additional damage to them. Your barb and your monk are going to come in behind, and they're going to pull all the mobs together. They're going to have that nice little mark on the entire group. Exploding palm goes out. Everything pretty much just incinerates. If there's a couple of trash mobs or, a yellow elite left or something like that, then you will see, your UE demon hunter coming in behind and clearing. If you're not out in front with this build, I'm trying to kind of stress this a little bit, that you're not going to be getting full potential out of what you're looking to do. Now, I have some gameplay going on in the background, and we are just going to jump right into the skills, the gear, the Paragon points, and all that good stuff. Before we get into the skills, I do want to talk about, they reworked Natalya's set. So in 2.2, Natalya's is completely different. It has 7 pieces to it, and there's a 6-piece bonus. So the 2-piece is going to reduce the cooldown of Rain of Vengeance by 2 seconds whenever you hit with a hatred generating attack or a hatred spending attack. So 2-second reduction to your Rain of Vengeance whenever you hit with those hatred generating or spending attacks. 4-piece is going to give Rain of Vengeance 100% increased damage, and then after casting Rain of Vengeance for the 6-piece, you're going to deal 400% increased damage and take 30% reduced damage for 5 seconds. So playing in hardcore, it is mandatory to make sure that you don't have that damage buff and the toughness buff to your character. You don't want it to ever drop. If it drops, it's not going to be too bad if you're not in a sketchy situation, but you're probably not playing the build 100% right if you're not in those kind of awkward situations where you're being the point man, where that would normally be your monk and your barbarian. So we're going to jump into the skills. This is going to be a cold-based Natalya's build. We're going to be using Rain of Vengeance, of course. We're going to be using Flying Strike. Call down a group of 8 Shadow Beasts to plummet from the sky. It's going to deal some damage, and it's going to be over a 4-second duration. And then every one of those 8 beasts, over those 4 seconds, has a chance to freeze a mob for 2 seconds. Now this is going to have some diminishing returns on it, so you're not going to get like the full 2-second duration or anything like that. But just know that you're going to be able to freeze a good portion of the screen with this skill. Strafe with Icy Trail, just a little bit more crowd control for your group. I didn't stress it really, but Rain of Vengeance, Flying Strike, the freeze that it has, the potential is very high. So when you're out in front of your group, anytime you encounter an elite, you make sure that you drop that rain on them. You then mark the target. Your barbarian and your monk are going to come up behind. Everything's crowd controlled for them. It makes it real easy for the monk to aggro the entire group of mobs. And everything just kind of explodes from there. And then, whatever's left over, that last character running in the back line will clean up for you. Preparation with punishment, nothing really game breaking or game changing here, just giving us more hatred. Very good skill for that. Vault with tumble. You need to be very mobile with this build. It is extremely important. You can't be the front line if you're moving slow. So vault, pretty much mandatory. Companion. Now, I'm actually using 2 pieces of Marauders, and I do want to kind of talk about why exactly I'm using 2 pieces of Marauders. Well, you get some additional crowd control from your spiders. Your bat is going to be giving you hatred. Hatred can become an issue. Sometimes it's normally not going to be too bad while you're speed clearing. There's going to be a lot of health globes to pick up, but honestly, as I keep saying, you want to be in the front line, so stopping to pick up every health globe is not necessarily ideal. Ferret Companion, it's going to be pretty nice to increase your movement speed. You're not going to need as much from your Paragon points, as well as when you activate this, it's going to then pick the health globes up for you that are in a 60-yard radius, thus giving you a little bit more mobility. The Wolf Companion, you are kind of a pretty much support type of Demon Hunter with this build. You're going to be able to output some pretty good damage, crowd control, and buff your allies with the Wolf Companion. Giving them a 30% increased damage for 10 seconds is great, as well as being in hardcore, the Boar. The Boar is going to increase your life regeneration by 5,000 per second and increase your resistances to all damage types by 20%. The Boar is so good in hardcore. Now, we're increasing our resistances by 20% from the Boar. Do keep that in mind, because there are going to be a lot of ways to increase our survivability. We're going to be running with a monk in hardcore. It's pretty nice when your monk's using Innas or something like that. It gives you a ton of survivability. Your barbarians are going to be using Warcry. That's going to stack on top of this as well. You're going to be using diamonds in the sockets of your gear. Also, just Perfectionist. Reduce the discipline cost of all skills by 10% and increase your armor and resistances to all damage types by 10%. Once again, just stacking more toughness. Now, I do want to talk about the last skill before we get into the rest of the passive, because this last skill, it's pretty optional. Most of the time, I'll end up running with Vengeance, with Seethe, just for additional hatred. But if you're looking for more crowd control, you could use From the Shadows. From the Shadows, these little dudes are going to pop out and they're going to throw these little dagger things at people, and it's just going to freeze them for 2 seconds. And you're able to freeze a ton of monsters with this skill. It's pretty good. But if you're looking for more survivability, stacking even more toughness, once again, gain 40% additional armor for 6 seconds. Now, that's not going to be an issue. You're going to be able to keep this buff active the entire time. It has a 10-second duration, but we're going to be getting cooldown on our gear. In addition, I'll show you the ring that we're going to be using in a little bit. That's going to once again help you reducing the cooldown of your Fan of Knives. Awareness, mandatory. Perfectionist, very good. Discipline cost, being mobile. As I've said, using Vault, being mobile is necessary to get full potential out of your mark, to get full potential out of being the one to be able to engage the elite before they all split up. You're able to lock them down, freeze them. That monk and barbarian, as I keep saying, comes in behind and just, everything dies. Having discipline cost reduction is just really nice, as well as the toughness buff. Tactical advantage, blood vengeance, pretty much mandatory. Tactical advantage is going to give you a movement speed buff whenever you use your vault, as well as blood vengeance is going to increase your hatred, which is nice. In addition, give you 30 hatred when you do pick up those health globes, and 3 discipline. Having discipline, pretty much mandatory. You need to be mobile. All right, we're going to jump over to the gear here real quick. Natalya's, we're using 6 pieces of it. No royal ring of grandeur. We're using the helmet, the chest, the pants, and the boots, weapon, and ring. Now, for the helmet, I don't like to get strafe damage on the helmet. Reason being is you're not getting much damage out of your strafe as it is. You are getting some, don't get me wrong, but the additional survivability that you can gain from having 750 or even up to 1,000 if you have an ancient Natalya's helm, definitely I prioritize the vitality first. Now, in my runs, I was using actually an XP gem. You don't have to use the cooldown. The cooldown is going to be for, if you don't want to be a scumbag and you want to provide a little bit more crowd control and a little bit more damage, but you want to get less experience, you could go for the diamond in the helmet. As I said, I'm using diamonds in all of my gear. An option, you could get hatred regeneration in place of vitality on your chest, but Rain of Vengeance damage on your chest, on your shoulders, as well as on your Natalya's weapon is 100% mandatory, so that way you are maximizing your damage. You are kind of a support demon hunter, but your damage output is still pretty high. 2 pieces of Marauders. Now, there's a really fine balance between how much cooldown, how much resource cost, and how much attack speed that you're going to be needing for this build. Because, as we said, while you're using your hatred spenders or generators, you're going to be reducing the cooldown of your Rain of Vengeance. Having that 30% damage reduction buff up all the time is it's pretty much needed to make sure that you don't like die, take too much damage, or proc or anything like that. Keep the rift moving. Now the ring that I want to talk about here is the Obsidian Ring of the Zodiac. It's pretty good. They changed it in patch 2.2. The secondary that it gives you is reduce the remaining cooldowns of one of your skills by 1 second when you hit with a resource spending attack. You're going to be spamming your strafe 95% of the rift, if not almost upwards to the entire time, except for that slight downtime. You're going to be then reducing your cooldowns of all of your skills by 1 second. That's going to be giving you then more wolf damage buffs for your allies. It's going to be giving you more preparation on hatred. It's going to be able to allow you to use your vengeance more often to give you more hatred that way if you want, or if you're going the crowd control route with the cold or the fan of knives, to make sure that you have your 40% additional armor buff up 100% of the time. That's how you're going to be able to do this, is through that, using that ring, as well as stacking cooldown on your gear. Now, how much attack speed, how much resource cost, and how much cooldown do you need? It's really a fine line, and how much resource cost that you need is honestly, you need how much you need. And I know that's not a great answer or anything, but it really just comes down to how much attack speed you have and how much cooldown that you have on your gear, as well as other places that you're going to be having resource cost reduction. So on your Obsidian Ring, it's really going to depend on what stat that you're going to re-roll off. I would always keep crit chance on the Obsidian Ring, but rolling off like cooldown, resource cost, maybe attack speed. I haven't really tried that yet. I would like to have one with like perfect resource cost, perfect cooldown, kind of give that a try. It's pretty good. Now for the rest of the gear, we have the M2 and everything. As I said, you want to make sure you get your Rain of Vengeance damage. The reason that I kept resource cost on this Obsidian Ring is because on my Nat Slayer I have cooldown, on my gloves I have cooldown, I have the potential to get cooldown on my shoulders if I get better M6 shoulders. So I pretty much needed some resource cost, but I do keep a backup Obsidian Ring that I have with cooldown. Now for the offhand, Calamity is going to kind of make or break this build. You're not going to be able to apply as much damage buffs to your allies without the Calamity. It doesn't have to be ancient, just know you want at least one of your weapons to be ancient. And the reason being is your Rain of Vengeance damage is going to be coming from your main hand, making sure that you throw whatever damage, whatever has the highest average damage. Now, if one of your weapons has attack speed, you do want to be paying attention to those small white numbers, the 1636 to 2626 damage on there. If that number is, if your other weapon is higher or lower, if it's higher, put it in your main hand. Now, I do like to get strafe damage on my boots. I know I said that it's not really that helpful, but you don't need the movement speed. You're going to be getting a little bit of passive from your ferret or whatever the case may be. Yeah, from your ferrets are going to give you a little bit of increased movement speed, and then you can get the additional 15% from your Paragon points. 25%, of course, is going to be your cap. Now, for your amulet, you do have a few choices. If you find a good Hellfire amulet, you could just go that route. I found one with Call the Weak damage on there, or Call the Weak passive on there. It's pretty good. The S of Johann, if you find a good S, this could have some pretty high potential to not always make your clears like that much faster, but at certain points, when this does proc at the right times, it can definitely help you out. If you find like an Eye of Etch, those are pretty good, or Eye of Etlich, or whatever they're called, those are pretty good. They're going to give you the reduced melee damage, I do believe, or reduced range damage. Or this is the amulet from Act 3, the Overwhelming Desire, just something that's going to be applying more damage, more crowd control, just anything that's going to be assisting. Just, you don't need the gold find or anything like that. So just find you a nice neck, use that. As for the belt, there's a new belt, Crushing Rain, patch 2.2. It's pretty good. Rain of Vengeance damage is also going to summon a Crashing Beast that deals 3,000 to 4,000% weapon damage is what the belt can roll. Unfortunately, mine is pretty much on the absolutely lowest end, in the bottom 200%. Ideally, you want that to be as high as possible because, as I said, you are supporting, but you are as well dishing out a decent amount of damage. You're going to be reducing the cooldown of your Rain of Vengeance a lot, having that 4,000, or 3,000 to 4,000 additional weapon damage every time you cast your Rain is going to be pretty clutch. So, that's pretty much the build. There's not a whole lot to it. My toughness, I do want to go over the gems. Using Taeguk, Once again, a way to stack additional armor. You're going to be just strafing around pretty much, constantly, and your Taeguk is going to be very easy to stack. Your toughness is going to be increasing, as well as, when you get your buffs from your barbarian, you get your buffs from the monks and everything, you are going to be able to get well over with properly geared Natalya's build, like well over 40 million toughness. I think I kind of on average, when I'm all buffed up, when I'm not using Blade of Armor, I'm sitting at around like 45 million. It's pretty good. You're going to be able to get very tough. As I said, last thing, we're just going to jump into the Paragon points. Max movement speed. Now, I guess I didn't talk about the rest of the gems. So Taeguk, very good. I would not take off Taeguk. It's just a way to survive. It's a way to improve your damage. Gogok of Swiftness. This Natalya set, as I was saying, thrives off of attack speed. It thrives off of cooldown reduction. Increasing your attack speed and increasing your resource cost reduction, just like they feed off of each other. So Taeguk of Swiftness, or Gogok of Swiftness, excuse me, while it may not be the highest damage output, it is going to provide you with more crowd control and make sure that you keep, your damage buffs up and your defensive buffs up. Bracers, kind of optional. Reaper's Wraps are good. There's not a huge amount of great options for you to go for. If you found like a good pair of Lacunis or something like that, you could definitely go ahead and try throwing one of those on. But Reaper's Wraps, kind of standard, not necessarily needed, but just additional hatred is going to be great. So we're getting additional hatred from our Blood Vengeance, and we're going to jump into the Paragon points now. We're getting additional hatred from our Paragon points. You don't need to go for hatred here. I'm just trying to maximize the value of the Reaper's Wrap since I am using them. Have a little bit of additional Paragon points to spend, making sure that you cap out your movement speed. If you're using M2, the ferrets are going to give you that movement speed, so you're only going to need 15% dexterity. Just max that out after you have these two maxed if you want to. Offensive, I would go for either crit hit chance or crit hit damage first. It's really going to depend on the gear that you have. You want your crit hit chance to be at a 1 to 10 ratio with your crit hit damage. So your crit chance for every one you have, you want 10 crit hit damage. It's kind of just standard. Then from there, I would go for cooldown, then attack speed, just cooldown first, because cooldown is going to provide you with more hatred and it's not going to drain your hatred as fast, whereas attack speed is going to drain your hatred more, and it is going to reduce your cooldowns as well, but it's just going to be draining your hatred more, but a little bit more damage output. So I just like cooldown more. I prefer it to not drop as much hatred. Defensive, all resistance, then armor, then life percent. You kind of want to make sure that you have these two maxed out. It's very important when you can. Utility, resource cost reduction, mandatory. Being in hardcore, life on hit is great. And then area damage, if you want more damage, area damage is going to be the way to go. And then there's always just gold find. So this is like your freezing point Natalya's build. You're pretty much dancing with death in hardcore. It's not necessarily for the faint of heart, but it's it's super exciting. It's a great build to play, and I'm just going to leave it at that. I am Chrome on Rust for Core Expert Gaming. Thanks for stopping by the channel. Like, subscribe if you would. I'm out of here, and you all, as always, have a great day.